The morning my mother-in-law accused me of murder, I was wearing my husband's favorite sweater, the green one he bought me last Christmas, soft cashmere that still carried hints of his cologne. I sat in that cold insurance office, watching Loretta Brennan point her trembling finger at me like I was some monster she'd finally cornered. "She killed my son for the money." Loretta's voice cracked through the sterile air of the Metropolitan Insurance Building's third-floor conference room. Her perfectly manicured nails, painted the deep burgundy she'd worn to Douglas's funeral, shook as she maintained her accusatory stance. "My Douglas would be alive if it weren't for her." The investigator, Jerome Watts, shifted his calculating eyes from Loretta to me. He was a heavy-set man in his 40s with the kind of face that gave nothing away, trained to spot lies and desperate people. His pen stopped moving across his yellow legal pad. The sudden silence felt like a held breath before a storm. My sister-in-law Roxanne leaned forward in her chair, her voice cutting through the tension with surgical precision. "Check what she put in his food. Melinda made him dinner every single night. She had complete control over everything he consumed." Her lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Funny how a healthy 36-year-old man just drops dead after eating his wife's cooking. The accusation hit me like a physical blow. My hands found the hem of Douglas's sweater, gripping the soft fabric as if it could anchor me to reality. Around the conference table, 5 pairs of eyes bore into me. Loretta's fury, Roxanne's satisfaction, Calvin's uncomfortable silence, the investigator's professional scrutiny, even the insurance company's receptionist, who'd brought in water bottles moments before, lingered by the door, drawn by the drama unfolding. "Mrs. Brennan," Investigator Watts addressed me formally, his tone carrying the weight of authority. "These are serious allegations being made. The death benefit on your husband's policy is substantial. $500,000 is certainly motive enough for us to investigate further." My throat constricted. Words felt impossible. How do you defend yourself against such vicious accusations when you're still drowning in grief? When just that morning my 8-year-old daughter, Gracie, had crawled into bed with me because she dreamed Daddy came home? The conference room door opened with a sharp click that made everyone jump. Dr. Francis Holbrook walked in, carrying a manila folder that seemed too thin to contain anything world-shattering, yet his expression suggested otherwise. The county coroner was a tall, distinguished man who'd probably delivered bad news 1,000 times, but today something different flickered in his eyes. "I apologize for being late," he said, his voice carrying an odd mixture of professionalism and what almost sounded like anticipation. Traffic from the county building was worse than expected. Loretta shot up from her chair. "Doctor, thank God you're here. Tell them what you found. Tell them what she did to my boy." Dr. Holbrook set his folder on the table with deliberate slowness. The fluorescent lights overhead hummed in the silence. He looked at each person in turn, his gaze lingering on me for a moment longer than the others. "We did find something unusual in Douglas Brennan's system," he announced. Roxanne made a small sound of triumph. Loretta gripped Calvin's arm so tight I could see her knuckles whitening. The investigator's pen hovered over his pad, ready to document my downfall. "The toxicology report revealed the presence of ethylene glycol," Dr. Holbrook continued. "Antifreeze." My vision blurred. The room tilted. This couldn't be happening. I'd never touched antifreeze in my life. I didn't even know where Douglas kept it in our garage. "But," the coroner raised his hand as Loretta started to speak, "the pattern of exposure tells a very different story than what's being suggested in this room." He opened his folder, revealing typed reports and photographs I couldn't quite make out from where I sat. The poisoning was chronic, occurring over approximately 6 months through small, repeated doses. The concentration patterns indicate occupational exposure, not acute poisoning through food. He pulled out a photograph. More importantly, we found evidence that leads us in an entirely different direction. Everyone froze. The accusatory energy that had been directed at me suddenly scattered, unsure where to land. Loretta's grip on Calvin loosened. Roxanne's satisfied expression wavered. The investigator set down his pen. "What we discovered wasn't from her cooking," Dr. Holbrook said, his words measured and final. "In fact, Mrs. Melinda Brennan had nothing to do with her husband's death." The silence that followed was deafening. In that moment, wearing Douglas's green sweater like armor against their hatred, I watched their certainty crumble and wondered what truth could possibly be worse than their accusations. 3 weeks earlier, life had settled into its new, painful rhythm without Douglas. He'd passed away on a Thursday night, just after 10:30, from what the emergency room doctor initially called a massive heart attack. I remember the exact time because I'd been watching the news, waiting for him to come to bed, when I heard the crash from our bathroom. By the time the paramedics arrived, my strong, healthy husband was gone. Douglas had built Brennan Landscaping from nothing into one of the most respected companies in our county. He'd started with just a pickup truck and a mower, working every daylight hour to grow something meaningful. His hands were always rough from work, permanently stained with earth under the nails, but gentle when he tucked our children into bed each night. The business had finally hit its stride this year, landing the exclusive contract for the Morrison estate and 3 other high-end properties. That morning before the insurance meeting, I'd stood in our kitchen making breakfast for Gracie and Ethan. Everything still felt wrong. Douglas's coffee mug sat untouched on the counter where he'd left it that last morning. His work boots still waited by the back door, caked with dried mud from the Morrison property. "Mom, why are you wearing Dad's sweater?" Gracie had asked, looking up from her bowl of cereal. Her eyes, the same warm brown as Douglas's, held that heartbreaking mixture of confusion and hope that had been there since the funeral. "Because it still smells like him, sweetie," I'd answered honestly. There was no point lying to children about grief. They felt it just as deeply. Ethan, 2 years older and trying so hard to be strong, had pushed his eggs around his plate. "Will we have enough money without Dad working?" The question had knocked the wind out of me. "That's why I'm going to this meeting today, buddy. Dad made sure we'd be okay. He had insurance to take care of us." The Metropolitan Insurance Building stood like a glass monument to other people's disasters, all clean lines and cold efficiency. I'd arrived 15 minutes early, needing time to steady myself in the parking lot. $500,000. It sounded like so much money, but all I could think about was how Douglas had calculated it down to our mortgage payment and the kids' college funds. He'd been so practical, so careful about our future. The Brennan family had already assembled when I walked into the conference room. They sat like they were posing for the world's most uncomfortable portrait. Calvin occupied the corner chair, his presence quiet as always. In 35 years of marriage to Loretta, I'd rarely heard him complete a full sentence without being interrupted. He nodded when he saw me, a small gesture that felt like the only kindness I'd receive in that room. Loretta sat in the center, her back rigid with the kind of posture that came from years of believing she was better than everyone around her. She'd never approved of me. I wasn't from their social circle, wasn't from money, wasn't anything but a dental hygienist who dared to fall in love with her precious son. She'd worn black to our wedding. Douglas had laughed it off, but I'd never forgotten. "Melinda's here," Calvin said quietly, the words barely reaching across the table. Roxanne didn't look up from her phone. Douglas's younger sister had always treated life like a competition where everyone else got a head start. At 31, she still lived in the apartment Loretta paid for, still jumped from job to job, still blamed everyone else for her problems. She'd asked Douglas for money so many times he'd started screening her calls. "I suppose you're here for your payout," Roxanne said, still typing. The words were casual, but venom dripped from every syllable. "I'm here because the insurance company requested this meeting," I replied, taking the chair farthest from them. The table between us felt like an ocean. Loretta's eyes traveled over Douglas's sweater, and her lips pursed. "Wearing his clothes already? How touching." Before I could respond, the door opened. Jerome Watts entered with the kind of authority that came from years of investigating insurance fraud. He was built like a former football player gone slightly soft, with shrewd eyes that had probably seen every type of grief and greed imaginable. "Good morning, everyone. I'm Jerome Watts, Senior Investigator for Metropolitan Insurance." He set down a thick folder that landed with a thud of finality. "We're here to discuss the death benefit claim for Douglas Brennan's life insurance policy." He arranged his papers with methodical precision, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. I noticed Roxanne had finally put down her phone. Loretta's fingers drummed against her purse. Calvin seemed to shrink further into his corner. "Before we proceed, Watts said, looking directly at me. "I need to inform you that when deaths occur this suddenly, especially with policies of this size, we conduct thorough investigations." The room felt smaller suddenly, the air thicker. This wasn't going to be the simple procedural meeting I'd expected. Investigator Jerome Watts opened his folder with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd destroyed lives with paperwork before. His fingers moved across the documents, pulling out specific pages and arranging them in a pattern only he understood. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across everyone's faces. "Mrs. Brennan," he began, then paused, looking between Loretta and me. "Mrs. Melinda Brennan, we need to discuss some irregularities in your husband's death." The word irregularities hung in the air like a threat. My stomach twisted into knots. What kind of irregularities? That's when Loretta exploded. She shot up from her chair with surprising force for a woman her age, her voice filling every corner of the conference room. "I'll tell you what's irregular. My healthy son dropping dead at 36. She did this. She killed him." The accusation hit me like a slap. Calvin reached for Loretta's arm, but she shook him off, her fury building momentum. "Mother Brennan, please, you're upset," I started, trying to keep my voice calm even as my hands trembled. "Don't you dare call me that." Loretta's face flushed red. "You never deserved that title. You never deserved him. Douglas called me the night before he died. Do you want to know what he said? He told me you'd been acting strange, pushing him to increase his insurance, asking questions about the payout." "That's not true." The words burst out of me. "Douglas wanted to increase the coverage himself when he landed the country club contract. He said we needed to adjust it for the business growth." Roxanne set down her phone with deliberate slowness, a smile playing at the eye corners of her mouth. "Really? Because I heard something different. My brother told me you two were fighting about money constantly. He said you were obsessed with that policy, always asking about the terms, the payout timeline." "We discussed finances like any married couple," I said, fighting to keep control. "We had 2 kids, a mortgage, his business expenses. Of course, we talked about money." "You served him dinner every night," Roxanne continued, her voice gaining confidence. "You had complete access to everything he consumed. You made his coffee in the morning, packed his lunch, cooked his dinner. The perfect opportunity to slip something in, slowly, carefully." Investigator Watts raised his hand, stopping the flood of accusations. His expression remained neutral, but I could see him processing every word, filing it away. "These are serious accusations. Mrs. Melinda will need to investigate thoroughly. The policy amount is substantial, and given the sudden nature of Mr. Brennan's death, combined with these family concerns, we have no choice but to look deeper." "You can't be serious," I whispered, the reality of the situation crashing over me. "I love Douglas. Our children just lost their father. Gracie cries herself to sleep every night. Ethan won't even go into the garage because he says it smells too much like Dad." "Love?" Loretta laughed, but there was no humor in it, just bitter rage. "You loved his success. His business was finally thriving. He'd worked himself to the bone for 15 years, and just when it was all paying off, suddenly he's dead. How convenient for you." Calvin finally spoke, his quiet voice barely audible. "Loretta, stop. This isn't helping anyone." "Not helping?" Loretta whirled on her husband. "Our son is dead, Calvin, dead, and she's about to walk away with $500,000 while my grandchildren grow up without their father. You want me to be quiet about that?" The investigator made notes on his yellow pad, each scratch of his pen feeling like another nail in my coffin. He looked up at me with those calculating eyes. "Mrs. Melinda, I need to ask you some specific questions. Where were you the night your husband died?" "Home," I answered immediately, "making dinner." Douglas came home late from the Morrison property. They're renovating their entire backyard, and he wanted to finish laying the irrigation lines before the rain came. He was exhausted, covered in dirt. He took a quick shower, ate dinner, and went to bed. 3 hours later, I heard the crash from the bathroom. "What did you serve him for dinner that night?" "Chicken marsala, his favorite. I made it at least once a week because he loved it so much. The kids had already eaten earlier because it was a school night. They had mac and cheese. Douglas and I ate together after they were in bed." "Just the 2 of you ate the marsala?" "Yes." "Convenient. Roxanne muttered, examining her manicured nails. Watts continued writing. Did your husband have any health issues? Was he taking any medications? Nothing serious. Blood pressure medication sometimes when work got stressful. He'd been complaining about headaches the last few months, feeling more tired than usual, but we thought it was just the long hours. The Morrison project was demanding. Headaches and fatigue, Loretta said triumphantly. Classic signs of slow poisoning. She was killing him gradually, making it look natural. The walls felt like they were closing in. These people who were supposed to be family were constructing a murder case against me while my children sat at school, orphaned and innocent. I stood up from my chair so abruptly that it scraped against the floor, the sound cutting through their accusations like a knife. Anger finally overtook the grief that had been suffocating me for 3 weeks. My hands pressed flat against the conference table as I looked each of them in the eye. Enough! The word came out stronger than I'd felt in weeks. You want to investigate? Fine. Test everything in my house, the food, the dishes, the pots and pans, my entire kitchen. Take samples from every surface Douglas touched. But while you're wasting time attacking me, ask yourselves who really benefits from Douglas being gone. Loretta's mouth opened in shock. How dare you turn this around? No, how dare you? I turned to face her fully, Douglas's sweater giving me strength. You want to talk about suspicious behavior? Let's talk about the real family dynamics here. I focused on Investigator Watts, who had stopped writing and was watching me intently. Did you know that Loretta co-signed Douglas's business loans? Every single one of them. Her name is on everything. She'd been pressuring him for months to make her a full partner in Brennan Landscaping. Calvin shifted in his corner chair, his eyes widening. This was news to him. That's family helping family, Loretta protested, but her voice had lost some of its certainty. Is it? Because Douglas told me you threatened to call in the loans if he didn't give you 50% ownership. You wanted control over his client list, his contracts, everything he'd built. I pulled out my phone, scrolling to the messages. I have texts from Douglas about it. He was sick about it, didn't know how to handle your manipulation. Roxanne stood up quickly. You're making things up to deflect. Am I? I turned to her, years of accumulated frustration pouring out. What about you, Roxanne? Did you mention to the investigator that you asked Douglas for $30,000 2 weeks before he died? Not a loan, a gift, for your latest business venture that was sure to make you rich this time. Roxanne's face went pale, her confident veneer cracking. That was a private family matter. Nothing's private when you're accusing me of murder, my voice echoed off the walls. Douglas refused you both. He was exhausted from being treated like a bank. Do you know what? He said to me that night after you called. He said he felt like a wallet with a heartbeat to his own family. Investigator Watts was writing furiously now. His entire demeanor changed. Ms. Roxanne Brennan, is this true? You requested money from your brother shortly before his death? It wasn't like that, Roxanne stammered. I needed help. Family is supposed to help each other. But he refused, Watts pressed. He said he couldn't, that everything was tied up in the business and the kids' college funds. Roxanne's voice turned bitter. Always about Melinda and the kids, never about his sister who needed him. Calvin stood slowly, his quiet presence suddenly commanding attention. Roxanne, you never mentioned asking for money. Loretta, you never told me about the partnership demands. It wasn't important, Loretta said, but her imperial confidence was crumbling. I continued, momentum building. Douglas was also planning to restructure the business to remove Loretta as co-signer. He'd found an investor who could buy out her stake. The paperwork was supposed to be finalized this week. That was news to everyone. Loretta sank back into her chair, her face ashen. He wanted to protect the business from family drama, I explained. He loved you all, but he was tired of the financial entanglement, tired of the guilt trips and manipulation. He wanted Brennan Landscaping to stand on its own. Watts looked between all of us, his investigative mind clearly recalculating. This puts things in a very different light, multiple parties with potential financial motives. I'm not finished, I said, my voice steady now. Roxanne, you have a key to our house. You knew Douglas's schedule. You knew when he worked late. You had access to everything I supposedly had access to, plus something I didn't have, a reason to resent him. "You're insane," Roxanne shouted, but her hands were shaking. "Am I? You posted on social media the day after his funeral about new opportunities coming your way. Who does that when their brother just died?" The room fell silent except for the humming of the fluorescent lights. Everyone seemed frozen in place, the accusations hanging between us like a web of suspicion and greed. Investigator Watts finally spoke. "I think we need to wait for the coroner's full report before making any more accusations." He looked at his watch. "Dr. Holbrook should be here any moment." As if summoned by his words, the door opened. Dr. Francis Holbrook entered, carrying his manila folder like it contained the answer to everything. His expression was grim but oddly satisfied, like someone who'd solved a puzzle no one else could see. "Sorry I'm late," he said, surveying the tense room, "but I have information that changes everything about this case." Dr. Holbrook set his folder on the conference table with deliberate precision, the sound echoing in the silent room. Everyone leaned forward unconsciously, drawn to whatever truth lay hidden in those documents. He opened the folder slowly, revealing typed reports, chemical analysis charts, and several photographs. The toxicology report confirmed the presence of ethylene glycol in Douglas Brennan's system. He began, his voice clinical and measured. "For those unfamiliar, that's antifreeze. It's a particularly insidious poison because it's sweet-tasting and initially causes symptoms that mimic other conditions." Loretta grabbed Calvin's arm, her knuckles white. "I knew it! She poisoned him." Dr. Holbrook raised his hand for silence. The poisoning was chronic, occurring over approximately 6 months through small, repeated doses. The concentration patterns and tissue analysis indicate occupational exposure, not acute poisoning through food. "Occupational?" I gasped, my mind racing. "From his landscaping work?" That's what we initially suspected, but the pattern didn't match typical occupational hazards. He pulled out a report. "We tested the chicken marsala remains from your refrigerator, Mrs. Melinda. Completely clean. We tested every food item, every surface in your kitchen. Nothing." Roxanne shifted in her chair, her phone clattering to the floor. She didn't move to pick it up. "But then we got curious about Mr. Brennan's work environment," Dr. Holbrook continued. "The Morrison property he was working on had been experiencing vandalism problems for months. Someone had been sabotaging equipment, slashing hoses, destroying newly planted landscaping. The Morrisons filed multiple police reports." He pulled out another document. 3 weeks ago, they installed security cameras without announcing it, hoping to catch the vandal. They captured something interesting. He produced a printed screenshot from security footage. Someone putting antifreeze in the water bottles the landscaping crew kept on site. The image was grainy but clear enough, a figure near the equipment shed, holding what appeared to be a container, pouring something into a cooler. "The Morrisons shared this footage with us yesterday." Dr. Holbrook pulled out an enhanced version of the image. "Ms. Roxanne Brennan, is this you?" The room exploded into chaos. Loretta screamed. Calvin stood up so fast his chair toppled backward. Investigator Watts reached for his phone, already dialing. Roxanne's face had gone completely white, her mouth opening and closing without sound. "That's not possible," Loretta gasped. "Roxanne, tell them it's not you." But Roxanne had started crying, ugly sobs that shook her whole body. "It wasn't supposed to kill him, just make him sick enough to quit. He promised me partnership in the business 2 years ago, before she got pregnant again." She pointed at me, mascara streaming down her face. "Then suddenly there's no room for family because he needs every penny for his perfect little nuclear family. You killed my husband because he wouldn't give you money?" I couldn't process what I was hearing. My legs felt weak, and I had to grip the table to stay upright. "I didn't mean for him to die," Roxanne wailed. "Just get sick enough to need help running the business. Then I'd step in, prove myself, show everyone I could be successful too. But it was so hot this summer, and he kept drinking more and more water because of the heat. The doses accumulated faster than I calculated." "Calculated?" Calvin's voice broke. "You calculated poisoning your own brother? He was supposed to get dizzy, maybe pass out at work, go to the hospital. They'd say he couldn't do physical labor anymore, and I'd take over the business side while he recovered." Roxanne was hysterical now. "I researched it all online. Small doses caused confusion, fatigue, headaches. It was perfect. He'd need me." Dr. Holbrook pulled out more documents. We found more footage. Ms. Brennan visited the Morrison property at least 15 times over 6 months, always when the crew wasn't there. We also tracked the antifreeze purchases to a hardware store near your apartment. Credit card records match. Investigator Watts had finished his call. Police are on their way. Nobody move. Loretta collapsed into Calvin's arms, her body shaking with sobs. My baby murdered my baby, she kept repeating, the words barely coherent. You knew about Douglas increasing the insurance, I said quietly, the pieces falling into place. You thought if he died, you'd contest the will, claim I was unfit, get control of both the money and the business. I never meant for this, Roxanne screamed. It was supposed to be simple. He gets sick. I save the company. Everyone sees I'm not the family failure. But he just kept working through the symptoms, kept pushing himself harder. Those headaches, I whispered. The fatigue. He thought it was stress. The ethylene glycol built up in his system over months, Dr. Holbrook explained. The final dose, combined with the accumulation and his exhaustion, triggered complete kidney failure and cardiac arrest. He died of chronic poisoning, not a heart attack. Police officers entered the room, their presence making everything suddenly, horribly real. They approached Roxanne with handcuffs, reading her rights as she sobbed about fairness and family and broken promises. The insurance office cleared out slowly after the police took Roxanne away. Her screams about unfairness echoed down the hallway until the elevator doors finally closed. Loretta hadn't stopped crying, collapsed against Calvin's shoulder, repeating, "Both my babies," over and over until the words lost all meaning. Calvin guided her out carefully, his own face aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Before leaving, Calvin stopped at my chair and placed a weathered hand on my shoulder. Melinda, I'm sorry. What we put you through today, after everything you've already suffered. Douglas loved you. He loved those children. We should have seen that instead of letting our grief turn into something ugly. He loved his family, I said, numbly. Even Roxanne. He would have helped her if she'd just been honest about needing help. I know. He was good that way. Got that from his mother, believe it or not. Calvin's voice cracked. The kids, Gracie and Ethan, they'll need their grandmother. When Loretta's ready, when you're ready, maybe they could see each other. I nodded, unable to form words. Despite everything that had happened in this room, my children deserved to know their father's family. They deserved to understand that love could exist even alongside terrible mistakes. Investigator Watts approached me after everyone else had gone. Mrs. Brennan, the insurance payment will be processed immediately. I'm sorry for what you went through today. No one should have to defend themselves like that while grieving. Will Roxanne go to prison? First-degree murder. She admitted to premeditation, research, and continued action over 6 months. She'll likely spend the rest of her life behind bars. 3 hours later, I sat in my car in the parking lot, still wearing Douglas's green sweater. The sun was setting, painting the sky the same orange and pink Douglas had loved. He used to stop working just to watch sunsets, said they reminded him that beautiful things happened every day if you just looked up. I picked up my phone and called the elementary school. Hi, this is Melinda Brennan. I need to pick up Gracie and Ethan early today. Is everything all right, Mrs. Brennan? The secretary asked with genuine concern. We just need to be together right now. 20 minutes later, I had both kids in the car. Ethan noticed my red eyes immediately. Mom, were you crying? Yes, buddy. Sometimes moms cry too. Is it about Dad? Everything's about Dad right now, but I learned something important today. I learned exactly how much he loved us. That evening, I sat both children down in our living room. The same room where Douglas had taught Ethan to tie his shoes, where Gracie had taken her first steps, where we'd spent countless movie nights tangled together on the couch. I need to tell you something about Aunt Roxanne, I began, choosing each word carefully. She made some very bad choices, and she's going to be gone for a long time. Did she do something wrong? Gracie asked, curling into my side. Yes, sweetie. She hurt Daddy because she was angry and jealous. She wanted things that weren't hers, and she let those feelings become more important than love. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, processing with the devastating logic of a 10-year-old. Is that why Dad got sick? Aunt Roxanne made him sick? Yes. She didn't mean for him to die, but she made terrible choices that she can't take back. Why would she hurt Dad? Gracie's voice was so small. He was nice to everyone. Sometimes people let wanting things become more important than loving people. Aunt Roxanne forgot that family isn't about money or business or being successful. It's about this, right here, being together, taking care of each other, choosing love even when it's hard. We spent the rest of the evening looking through photo albums, Douglas teaching Ethan to ride his bike, Gracie on Douglas's shoulders at the county fair. Our last Christmas, all of us in matching pajamas that Douglas had pretended to hate, but secretly loved. His hands dirty from work but gentle as he braided Gracie's hair for school. The insurance money would come through, $500,000 that now felt like blood money, tainted by the truth of how Douglas died. But I'd use it the way he intended, for our children's future, for the life he'd worked so hard to provide. I kept wearing his green sweater for weeks after that day, not just for comfort anymore, but as a reminder that love and trust are precious, fragile things, that family can heal or destroy, that the real poison isn't always in what we eat or drink, but in the jealousy and resentment we let fester in our hearts. Douglas Brennan died believing in family, never knowing his own sister was slowly killing him. But his love, his hard work, his dedication to our children, that lives on. That can't be poisoned or stolen or destroyed by anyone's jealousy. Sometimes the greatest tragedy isn't just losing someone you love. It's discovering that the danger was sitting at your dinner table all along, smiling while they poured another glass of poison. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Your comments mean everything, so let me know your thoughts below. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful true stories that remind us what really matters in life. Thank you for listening to my story.